Resuming recording here. This is the second part of the interview between Jordan Peterson and Russell Brand. Brand's conducting the interview on his show Under the Skin. We're picking up about halfway through. Peterson is responding to a question asked by Brand, which had a bunch of different sub-questions all going in different directions.
See, the other thing you see in psychotherapy, for example, is that when you're trying to lead people forward out of the darkness, let's say, out of anxiety and depression and despair and resentment and bitterness and anger and all of those things.
The particular cult which Mr. Brand belongs to, I alluded to in the previous video. I'm wondering, is he aware of what that cult is? If he is not aware, if he hasn't had a clear indication of what that cult might be yet, he might be getting closer to it.
Catastrophic interactions with their family is that
you
get them to stop avoiding confronting the terrible things that are in front of them, right? So basically what you do, instead of saying to them...
He looked directly at him when he was saying that. Did you see that?
You know those terrible things that are happening? Just ignore those and find some peace, right? Get your mind away from it. That isn't what you say. You say turn around and look at them even more than you've been looking at them. It's very paradoxical advice, but of all the things that have been proven to aid people's recovery and movement towards mental health, that's like at the top of the list. Voluntary confrontation with what you are afraid of.
Fair.
Or what you despise, even, for that matter. And so Jung had an axiom that he derived from the alchemists, which was inster quellinus invenitur, which roughly meant that which you most need will be found where you least want to look. Which is,
fuck that.
Yeah. Well, that was also his explanation for why people weren't enlightened. Because you think, well, the California approach to enlightenment, to speak, kind of satirically, is follow your bliss. It's like, well, that's easy. If that was the case, everyone would be enlightened. But the Jungian approach is, no. You do what's meaningful and pay attention, follow the truth, and it will take you to the worst place you can imagine. And then maybe there's some chance for enlightenment.
Campbell's
Chapel Perilous in, how to put it, Discordian terms. Although I haven't read Chapel Perilous yet.
somewhat revoked that I follow your bliss mantra, though, by saying he wish he'd said follow your blisters. Like what you should follow is the pain.
Yeah.
And
I didn't know he said that.
Yeah, it's cool, isn't it? Well, it's wicked. Put that on the scoreboard.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Like another thing that I know I've been thrown because you've said that I said something that you didn't know, and it's unravelled my entire Weltanschauung. Now I've reached for a bit of German language to pull my way back in. Oh yeah, Helen Melville will help me out. I'm reading this Moby Dick. It smashed my head up. When he says in there's towards the end of the book, Ahab, when he's hanging out with Pip and stuff, he's really losing it now, but maybe he's finding it too. There's a bit where he talks about will. Who is it that moved?
I am not looking for his tattoos here.
This arm.
I'm wondering actually what's on his jersey.
He says, who is it that thinks these thoughts? If the mighty sun has no control over its movements, what control has Ahab?
Oh, it's a jiu-jitsu crew. Oh, okay.
Have over his thoughts. He's talking about fate and destiny and these ideas again. Seem to me very potent, powerful themes. The position
he struggles with a great whale, right? And that's the dragon of the abyss. That's Moby Dick. It's the hero against the dragon of the abyss, and he's obsessed with it.
Ahab is St. George? What? Am I missing something here?
Right. Well, he should be obsessed with it. It's what to be obsessed with is the dragon of the abyss. That's the oldest story of mankind.
I think I prefer the Arthurian bit to Moby Dick, dude.
Is that your proper obsession is the dragon of the abyss? That's where the gold is.
Which means actually Merlin's another way of considering that self-same dragon.
Yes, that's
the serpent of the world is different than the dragon of the abyss. I think you might add. I'm also want to add
where the gold is,
even though that's where
the gold is.
Most terrifying.
Also a bloody tragic ending, except unless you take Ishmael as the protagonist, in which case Ishmael survives and Ahab,
You should have been fish meal. That's right.
I'm gonna ruin it for anyone. Dice.
Call me fish meal.
But like,
Right. So it's a tragedy. It's a tragic encounter with the Dragon of Chaos. He's a failed hero.
there's two
Fundamentally.
outcomes. He's a failed, and he's lost that limb and stuff, and I'm sure, sort of symbolic.
Just like Captain Hook and the crocodile.
Yeah, they have to have. Yeah, no, I like. For me, it's very exciting when I see these patterns of perennialism. For me,
It is exciting,
because
yeah.
there's
Perennial.
implicit in it is truth. And now that thing we were talking about a minute ago, where I got excited because I said follow your blisters.
Implicit in it is truth. Hang on a minute. Perennialism in human culture is sometimes referred to as epigenetic. Let that sink in. There's an epigenetic influence which is likely to occur several generations apart. It has nothing to do with philosophical, idealistic truth even at all. It's a reality. Follow your blisters. I'm following his exact point here because I wonder where he's going, if he's going to get there or not. I think I might know where he's going, and he doesn't want to talk about epigenetics. If a population is already prone to diabetes, the following generation, and then the following generation after that, the grandchildren of that population which is prone to diabetes will also have a high incidence rate, but the one in between not so much. Which means that the grandkids of the diabetics need to be warned in the here and now. Hey, now is the time to follow your blisters and not your sugar urge.
The thing I was going to say is like there's some sort of maxim I understand in Buddhism of like let it burn, let it burn, let it burn, like take away from me everything.
Right. And there's the idea is also there in Christianity. So there's an occult
Oh yeah, because Christianity came before Buddhism, Jordan.
interpretation. There's letters on Christ's cross, I-N-R-I. Jesus Christ.
Jordan,
It means
you're our soul.
Jesus Christ, King of the Jews. And it was put there by the Romans, but there's an occult interpretation.
You know who else was a Roman, Jordan? Paul. That's right, Saul of Tarsus. He was also a Roman, wasn't he, Jordan?
In Latin, which I can't reproduce, but it means through fire all things are renewed.
Pure refiner's fire is another deal, but it's not really the same idea. Refining to get to the purity, as opposed to renewing by fire.
And one of the deepest ideas of Christianity is that you should burn everything off that's part of you.
See, that's what I'm talking about. Refining as opposed to renewing. It's a whole other concept, Jordan. Mr. Keep within the category.
Isn't part of that thing that can die and be reborn. Like there's all sorts of baggage that people say that there's baggage that you're carrying. Everyone knows that. It's dead wood. It's like that has to burn off. And that's that's way more of you than you think. It's way more than you think.
Whilst you still haven't said whether or not you believe in God, and I won't keep going on about it because I'm not one of them type of people. Like it seems to me.
Good to know that.
Yeah.
We just take it for granted in the group I go and talk to every now and again.
So like it seems to me that
It's actually on the wall. We got to say it every week. We believe in it. If we don't believe in it, then we're going to get another tattoo with 33 on it.
you revere truth, and it seems to me
How hard could it be?
that you are interested in the truth in scripture and mythology. Now, then what this leads me to is something we touched upon briefly. It's about the role of power and the function of morality and ethics and indeed simpler ideas, well, terms, if not ideas, such as compassion and goodness. And so when, it's interesting
Soap?
to me that you've written sort of an accessible sort of self-help type book that, clean your room, stand up.
Burke. B-O-O-K, or did he say Burke? Did he call him Burke? Did he try to get that snuck in there?
Straight, stick your shoulders back, stuff that
Fuckface.
like I would not query. The only thing that I feel like I would like to ask you about, because I don't know if I even have a constituency, but the people I find myself talking a lot to Muslim people, young women, self-harming, eating disorders, these kind of, you're a clinical psychologist, so I imagine you have more access to that kind of information and those kind of experiences than I do. I have this strong feeling that I am supposed to make myself available for the vulnerable, for the powerless and for the voiceless.
Wow. Not predatory at all. Not predatory at all. In defense of the predators here, No, I'm not talking about human culture. I'm talking about general animal kingdom culture, right? Predators single out. If there's a herd, say, and you're part of a pack of animals which hunts the herd, you don't necessarily go after the strongest animals, now do you, Russell?
So
That's a fine idea.
This is the one.
question is, how do you do it?
how do we
'Cause
do
it's
it?
hard to do it.
Huge bloody question. Sometimes they don't want me interfering in their lives.
Thanks, Jordan.
Majority of the time.
Right. There certainly is that. Well, there's a maxim that's often applied by people who work in old age homes.
Really?
Which is never do anything for the residents that they can do themselves.
They can't steal their own money and have sex with their sleeping body. I'm a comedian.
I have sex with sleeping old age pensioners. So.
I'm a comedian.
Very
Thanks.
funny.
I don't know why I say things like that. It's paid off over the long run. Yeah. No.
Right, exactly.
So isn't it like?
So it's hard. Like the thing about compassion is it's not sufficient to produce solutions. Compassion is an unbelievably.
To be fair, I've been looking at the obituaries page on Wikipedia from time to time. I've made videos about this recently as well. And the first murder of the year, January 1st, was indeed an old age pensioner.
Useful emotion if you're dealing with 6-month-old infants.
What
Because
about?
they're always right.
Jeez, they're an arsehole. No, but like you know, like, but what I want
That's
to.
not very compassionate.
Well, you said it doesn't work. No, but what about? What I want to say is, like, I know you're saying all this thing about sort of the one of the essential themes.
Does he have a hook in his fucking lip there? I didn't notice that.
Is about the Christ myth being, you know, sort of burn away all that cannot be reborn. But bloody hell, mate, in the actual language, all he bangs on about is kindness, kindness, love, love, kindness, kindness, love,
Not
love.
in Revelation. Not in Revelation.
Like, when you have a seed, right? You don't burn. Well, you could consider the constituents of the seed, which are fatty and which are meant to be used as energy to put into the process of building the primary, you know, the first few roots that go down and some kind of a green shoot which comes up out of the ground with a leaf or two on it. The energy which it takes out of itself is burned up, but it's converted immediately. There is nothing lost there. It's not like we burn something in a fire and release a whole bunch of energy in the form of plasma and some byproducts which are not completely consumed in the rest of the process. So I don't know if I actually follow this metaphorical foray into metaphysics that they've taken.
He's a judge in Revelation.
What? And you're still taking that as what? Books beyond the Gospels. You're still
Revelation.
love, kindness, love, love, kindness, kindness. Is mate in the actual language. All he bangs on about is kindness, kindness, love, love,
Jesus.
kindness,
Oh.
kindness, love,
Not
love.
in Revelation. Not in Revelation. He's a judge.
In the Gnostic book Revelation, the one that was attributed to John, same John who wrote the Gospel of John, the Gnostic Gospel. Okay.
Judge in Revelation.
What? And you're still taking that as what? Books beyond the Gospels.
Written by one of the Gospel authors. Thank you very much, Russell.
You're still taking as the word of Christ.
John isn't the word of Christ? What?
Well, I'm
Why not?
taking them as part of the entire.
Anything they do in Christ's name given to those apostles. John's a fucking apostle. And he doesn't get Christ's stamp of approval and therefore the mark of his master / creator.
Purpose of the story. I mean, the reason that Jung thought Revelation
Russell doesn't know what to think about that. Oh,
appended to
okay.
the Bible was because the Christ in the Gospels was aired too much.
I don't believe it either, but I can see inconsistency from time to time when they don't want to hear what they don't want to hear.
In a sense, on the side of mercy.
Because he'd had to back away from some of his valued and cherished beliefs about the Bible, which he doesn't really hold to.
Mercy and not enough on the side of judgment. Because here's
Discernment
why.
is
There's
important.
a technical.
It's like looking at a mouse trapped in, or no, maybe a rat that wasn't killed by the trap which trapped it.
There's a technical reason though. It's like,
We don't want a judgmental Jesus.
well, you don't have a choice, because if you have
That's the whole point of having him as your defender. He's your advocate, not merely your judge.
an ideal, it's a judge. Like you have an ideal, and there might be an ideal that you have of you. It's simultaneously your judge because you fall short of it.
I understand this because, funny enough, I was talking to the fellow that taught me meditation yesterday, Bob Roth. So he's a student of the Maharishi, you know that. He said that when Maharishi was asked, what is the one principle?
Can't help but notice he wants to throw a punch with the sound effect there. Can't help but notice. I've done it. I'm guilty of it myself. Guilty as charged. That's why I noticed it. I was thinking about something else to say during the course of this video. I was watching a movie lately. This is a lateral reflection. It will mean more as time goes on through the rest of this video. I'm positive sure already. I was watching a movie recently. And during the course of the movie, it hadn't been hard to follow who was who and what character was named what and things like that. It was a pretty interesting movie. I don't want to say anything else about the movie. Don't want to give away anything about it. No spoilers. Not even so much as the title. Suffice it to say, it came from independent means. It was lower budget digital production, which relied heavily on the science fiction elements to sell the not the 3D, but the CG presentation. Anyway, through the course of the movie, after I'd watched the movie, some hours later, I was immediately struck by understanding, an intuition which came to me from the visual elements of the movie. There was a way built into the movie for me to automatically, quickly, never ever forget the name of the character. To never ever forget the name of the character. It was so easy and so obvious the way that it had been done. I was drawn back to it, and then when I stopped, in my mind's eye, in my mental palace, as it were. Have you ever heard the term mental palace when it comes to arranging facts or ideas in your own consciousness? How to keep things in straight and how to remember things by relying on graphic, visual terms in your own head. This movie had injected a visual term which allowed me to immediately and instantly remember this character's name. As a consequence, I understood what it was to have this mental palace, which wasn't unorganized, but had been organized. If you're careful with the way that you put information into your head, into your consciousness, you could arrange it so that some things are never forgotten. You could potentially remember something up to including perhaps larger, up to including and then beyond Dunbar's number of 150 people. Say, for example, you could remember a list of a greater than 150 people if you had such a way of arranging the information in your head that was visual and relied on a visual interpretation, which you could reliably go back to at some later point. I've picked this up in the movie, and I've been thinking about it consequently ever since. But that's why Mr. Brand here wants a right-handed fist for that.
Well, he didn't say kindness or compassion or anything like that. He said discernment.
Right.
And discernment, which path are we going to follow?
That's
Where is the
right.
attention going?
Yeah.
But
that's judgment. That's why in Revelation, Christ divides the damned from the saved, and most are damned. It's discernment.
And the story, is that in Revelation, Mr. Peterson, or is that in the Gospel of Matthew, in a parable?
And what that means in some sense is that there's 100,000 ways to do things wrong and only one way to do them right. Or maybe only 5 ways of doing them right. But you know that in your own life.
Maybe only 5. There's only one. What? Okay.
Is that there's an infinite number of snares that you can tangle yourself up in. And to find that pathway where everything is balanced, that's very...
Infinite number of snares, only one way, or maybe 5.
That requires continual discernment and attention. And so you can't have an ideal without it being a judge. And
you can't have an ideal without there being some external or other authority to to verify that the ideal is actually being adhered to. problem, human perception, and the human ability to present a false impression, to describe one or to present one, or to knowingly, maybe even unknowingly, see something or to present present information which is absolutely not true.
You can't live properly without discernment. But that doesn't mean compassion, and compassion isn't relevant.
Discernment is a much nicer word than discrimination, don't you think?
It doesn't mean that at all.
It's the same thing. Discrimination is not necessarily a bad thing. We use it as if it's ultimately always pejorative when it is not. Being discriminating is very good. For example, if you're in an environment where it is important to know the difference, you're in an environment where some of the food sources presented to you are poisonous. They're always poisonous. And if you do not discriminate the poisonous from the non-poisonous, the toxic from the not toxic, things will happen. The consequence is your inability to discriminate. This discernment is what he's talking about. It's how can you look and know?
I've got to ask you something that sort of occurs to me. See, like you have found myself in different types of controversial situations, various conflicts.
Well, I like you. No, this guy was a media jockey. No. How to put this? This guy used to do a comedy show where they were trying to punk or prank people in the British establishment. He's been a tool of the media all along. He's now presenting as a half-radical leftist who has very clear cult connections, which he isn't talking about much, although Peterson seems to have sniffed them out.
And much of the time it is because, like Albert Mayswell said, tyranny is the deliberate removal of nuance.
Mm-hmm.
People remove...
Right.
And I didn't even say that. That's not what I meant.
That's a good phrase.
It's good shit, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
like,
good.
But like, the thing, right...
The deliberate removal of nuance.
Nuance.
Yeah, that's what makes it different than ignorance, because ignorance, there's no nuance in ignorance, but it's excusable because you just don't know any better.
You didn't
but when
notice.
it's deliberate, that's a whole different story.
Fair.
That's very nice. Who said that?
Albert.
I agree. Deliberate ignorance, or deliberately, choosing to be ignorant or ignoring all details.
Mays was a filmmaker. He made like Grey Gardens. He made that I did a documentary with him very briefly, and he made that Beatles movie when the Beatles first came to the States. He made Gimme Shelters. The Mayswell's brother. They're like old guys now, brilliant documentarians. I can see our crew here and nodding with approval. He invented much of the fly-in-the-wall verite style that's informed subsequent documentary.
Cinema verite is not documentary. It's made to appear that you're looking at something which takes place in this real world. That's different.
Is the deliberate removal of nuance. I worked with him sort of briefly.
And I'm making a nuanced point there.
Filming none other than President Donald Trump of all people. But like one of the things
called
that
him
I
president.
wanted to talk about.
He called him president. Thank you very much, Mr. Brand. At least we know he isn't entirely crazy.
Was if I like, this is the thing. I don't like all of the. I don't like the. I agree, or I feel. I don't know what you feel. That one of the neoliberalism.
You can't look at the camera there because you know why? He called Donald Trump president, without sarcasm there.
But abandoned its allegiance, and leftist politics has, in a sense, abandoned the working class, and I can understand their rage. But the feeling I personally...
He had abandoned them a long time ago now, didn't it, Russell? Which is why when you tries to identify himself as like Jordan Peterson, no. Jordan Peterson is a clinical psychologist who worked across the border of the United States and Canada. Most of his professional career has been published and does this and does that. And who's Russell Brand? He's been published, but he used to work for the media, which lies for a living, and that's part of the reason why the left doesn't represent the working class is because of guys like this guy. He's not at all like Jordan Peterson. Peterson's probably a member of the AMA,
had is if I sense that I'd said things, and I've done this, so I know that
he only talks to anorexics.
Of offended women, which when I was a single person, I was promiscuous, and I know that that caused me conflagration and conflict. Or when I've done things like in the spirit of humour that have had like a kick.
When he was working for the media,
Back, I've always felt bad.
In the spirit of humor.
If I feel like I've offended people that I would regard or culturally are regarded as vulnerable.
Yeah.
So like around the when we make the conversation about the use of language, tyranny and oppression in free speech, well, obviously I agree with you, but I do take from the gospel version of Christ the idea that kindness.
The gospel version. The gospel version. What gospel is he referring to? Please tell us the gospel version you're referring to. Is this a conglomerate from the synoptic gospels where you only take the things that you like thinking about and don't think about the rest of the gospel that they come from? Or is it from the Gnostic gospel of John, which is the same as Revelation, the very last book of the New Testament, which is what Jordan Peterson was saying, which makes very clear, yes, we should probably interpret Jesus more along the lines of this ultimate judge, person who separates the sheep from the goats in the terms of the Gospel of Matthew, which doesn't accord with this version of Jesus which Brand is going to now present, which has nothing at all to do with any gospel which is identified, but exists merely in the ether of people's opinion.
Love. We can't, we have to continue to find resources for ongoing, and we'll continue to fail, but we must continue to be loving. So yeah. My question is if you have found yourself in...
Where did he find that? Jesus didn't win the battles he won with the Pharisees by insisting on love. He insisted on observance of the letter of the law, knowing full well that the people that were, for example, the woman caught in adultery. I've heard this one recently because of Christopher Hitchens. The woman caught in adultery was defended because of the law's insistence that the person who stoned her be without sin. Ha! Is that love?
A position where I kind of think some...
Or is it insistence upon dogmatic truth? Dogmatic is written in the law. Is that love?
People are using you.
The New Testament also insists that we call God who wrote that law love. Which, goes round and round and round and round.
To sort of say, fuck you women, or fuck you transgender people. And for me, I think I would want to sort of go, oh, that's not my bag.
That's not my bag, even though it's got my name on it and, all those drugs inside, they're not mine either.
So, where do you stand on that?
Well, I think that, first of all, we'll go to the most...
It's not my bag, baby, yeah! Groovy, baby, yeah!
Part of the question, which is this issue about love. And, like, one of the...
Here's a funny thought. It also gets back to this whole mental palace thing. I came up with some decent thoughts a number of years ago, which I put into my own little mental palace. Determined I was not going to forget them soon, not going to forget them lightly. I was going to pay attention to them and also pay attention to spreading those thoughts around to the society that I'm a part of. And one of those thoughts came to me when I was sitting in a bar. I think I've probably already described this on YouTube. I should describe it again, though. Sitting in a bar and a person sitting across from me, we're having a conversation. And the conversation came around to this nugget, which this person said. And the person said, you have to choose between love and fear when you're dealing with God or you're dealing with religious culture. And I said, hey, now, you know yourself, that's not fair. It's not fair, nor is it truthful. You have to love and fear if you really want to talk about religious culture. If you do not fear that culture, then it loses its power and it becomes very, very jealous indeed. Also very angry.
Things I've thought about a fair bit is the meaning of the Sermon on the Mount. And as far as I can tell, it's basically a two-part. It's two-part wisdom. The first is that you should aim at the highest good that you can imagine. And that would be a good that includes everyone.
I don't follow that argument whatsoever. You should aim at the highest good that's imagined. I see lots of promises to specific groups, and then sometimes I even see contradictions of promises. Where, like, for example, one group is given the kingdom of heaven, and then some later group is gifted the same kingdom of heaven. Now, does this mean that there's enough heaven to go around for all these different groups? Why didn't he just say, "Hey, you all get to go to the kingdom of heaven"? There's this. I get a sense when I read through the Beatitudes since leaving Christianity, that the latter group, which is gifted the kingdom of heaven, is given so in replacement to the earlier group who has served their function. That's what I think.
Right. So if I wanted what was good for you, say, if I
Poor in spirit. Poor in spirit. You know who they refer to? It's the lukewarm who he'll spit out of his mouth. That's who I think.
genuinely wanted it, I'd want it in a way that was good for you now and good in the long run and good for you and your family and your community and maybe good for me too. You know, you could conceive of that as the desire. And I think that's a good definition of love, is that you actually want the best, you want the best possible outcome. And in the Gospels, of course, that's extended even to your enemies.
Yes.
Right? Is that, okay, if we're going to have things good, let's have it good enough for even the people that set themselves up against me. Because if the world was running properly, things would be good for them too. And that would be better. And it seems to me that that's a very good way of looking at things. It's a difficult way of looking at things. And then the second part of the Sermon on the Mount is something like, having established that as your aim, which is no easy thing, by the way, right? Because you have to be pretty clear-headed and single-minded to actually want that to be your aim. Then you can concentrate on the day and you can try telling the truth. And you can ally, so there's truth and love that are allied together. Truth, love, and attention, it's something like that are all allied together. With regards to transgressing.
It's funny that he insists on allowing religious truth to stand in defiance of actual reality, which is Nietzsche's point. It's Nietzsche's point in places like the genealogy of morals and the like. The Antichrist too, among others. So, I find that suspicious. I find that very suspicious. There's an active urge within not only Christianity but other religions, other similar religions, to not deny pleasure like in a Buddhist sense, but to deny the rightness of naturalness. Natural, like your nature is fallen, and what's existing in the transcendent realms is perfect and everlasting. So you're aiming towards some eternal reward in the here and now when you accept the free gift in Christianity's terms. The free gift. You accept this free gift and they suck all your political power for the rest of your life. That's what I see. But that's how I describe it. Some people call that cynical. I think it's truth. I think it's truth because I observe how it works. People who are naturally inclined to volunteer and who don't have a sense of, no, I shouldn't, I gotta be careful about how I say this, but whose sense of whose lack of boundary, who truly take Christ's sense of give everything away, they get burned out so quickly in a religious culture. It's not funny. They don't stay there forever. They don't last forever. They can't. And if you listen to the rest of the New Testament, if you read the rest of the New Testament, so there's places where it talks about how coals, maybe it isn't in the New Testament, but it's one of those illustrations which comes through Sunday school training. If you have a coal which is separated from the rest of a bed of coals, it burns out quicker than the bed of coals will. Well, fair enough. But if you have a coal which is burning hotter than all the rest because it's a different kind of coal, it's still going to, it might also burn out even though it's surrounded by a bunch of other coals. It doesn't burn slower because the rest of the coal do. And that's what happens to people who volunteer too easily in religious culture. If you're careful, you tithe, and hopefully they don't look at you again and decide to eat you first. Here we go. They also call themselves sheep.
Against the vulnerable. I don't think that that is what I've done. I think that people have claimed that, but I don't think there's any evidence for it. I mean, first of all, I know absolutely that I have brought perhaps thousands of people, maybe tens of thousands of people, but certainly thousands of people away from identification with the right, because they write me all the time and tell me that. I've received about 30,000 letters.
Here we go.
Specifically from people who've been...
I figured he would tackle this head on, and I'm glad that he did. Why should he suffer this alt-right designation merely because some media fucking chuckle fuck decides to call him alt-right? Like, in fact, the guy who's been interviewing him hasn't had the balls to do, but has only insisted on using grammatical constructions which allow him to level such a claim from the convenient distance of some other media chucklefuck without actually saying some other media chucklefuck. He doesn't take away any of their credibility. Heaven forbid he smear the good name of this media fucking chucklefuck like himself. But no, he's alt-right.
Watching my YouTube videos since August, and 25,000 of them or so, we've tried to count, are from people who said that they were in very dark places and that their lives are much better, much oriented towards truth and responsibility and away from political ideology, mostly on the right, that they were attracted on the right, because I have more people like that write me than people who say that I've, rescued them from the hellholes of the radical left. I think that's more of a
eating ramen noodles and starving to death. Yeah.
Historical accident in some wise than anything else.
I don't understand why we continually make bombs down here.
But also with the transgender issue, more specifically, I've received now at least 40 letters from transgender people, and the only one of them was critical, and it wasn't that critical. The rest of them all said, we never signed up to be poster boy of the year for the radical left, and it's been no picnic, believe me. All that's happened is that our lives have become much more difficult, and I believe that, and I don't see that. I think one of the mistakes that the radical left makes, and this is part and parcel of their flirtation with identity politics, is that they fall all over themselves to believe that if a person identifies as a minority, then they immediately have the right to speak for all the people who are in that minority. And that's a claim that I reject completely. I mean, first of all, there is no transgender community. It's not a community, because a community is constantly interacting.
Have this discussion among atheists from time to time too. Working theory. Here's a working theory. Not conspiracy. Well, yes, maybe it is actually a conspiracy theory. But it is a working theory. Suppose that since, say, around about Christopher Hitchens, who passed away, I think it was 2011, I remember saying at the time to somebody that I had only recently met during the period 2011, 2012, 2013, that I thought it was possible that there was a certain amount of cultural cooperation between different groups to rid the world of the atheist community. To get rid of all the atheists. There is no community. You can't herd the cat. But still they were going to attempt to get rid of all the atheists. And the reason why I thought in those terms was I was really aware, totally aware, of how visible certain gatherings, say on a weekly basis or on a monthly or on a periodic basis due to things like YouTube or anything else which existed before that and the internet, up to 2011, 2014, somewhere in there. The visibility of the groups had made it so there had been an intentional attempt to fracture it, or to power grab as much of it as possible under a single political block, a political action block, a pack, if you will. And that was called Atheism Plus. So since then, I've started to insist. This is another one of my little mental constructs from my palace. You can figure out a way of remembering it. Since then, I've made an intentional effort to spread this idea, which is that as an atheist, it doesn't mean that I don't believe in God, and just as simple as that, and therefore there is no atheist community, blah blah blah. No, it means that I have no use for theological argument. I don't believe any theological argument on its face alone or on its faith, which makes me a problematic thing. It makes me the worst kind of atheist. He's a militant atheist. Militant in which way? I don't do anything physically. I don't do anything materially to harm you, other than illustrate why it is your categorization, the thing which makes me part of a community. See, it's because I reject my part in your community. It's because I don't let you have my political power. I am an atheist. Hitchens used to say he was an anti-theist to distinguish himself, and I disagree. I disagree with having to put myself against the people when I really have a problem with the organization. The problem is in the head. So I'm anti-theological, which is where the atheist. I am the ist. But my antithesis, the thing in which I am antithetical to, is the theological argument. I don't think it's actually. I think it's a contradiction of term. It's internally contradictory. Theology.
I think in networking and has a shared purpose.
I mean, people have an analogy. We call it psychology. Does psychology replace theology in the 19th and 20th century? Here's the real problem between these two people, and guess what they're not going to talk about?
And all that. Transgender people.
I'm guessing because I haven't watched this yet, but I'm taking a guess. I'm making a little guess. I'm putting it in my mental palace now. Will they or won't they talk about the cult, which hasn't been talked about yet?
Just as diverse as any other people. It's like saying, well, there's no real black.
Because religion, theology, are they the same or not? Dogma has been replaced by psychology. Hopefully science.
Community. There's not homogenous political viewpoints across the black population.
I suppose so. I agree to a point that these taxonomies are necessarily externally imposed, because how would they be intrinsically experienced? I understand that. But also it seems to me that there is a thing called the experience of being an African American, and you can put into that.
He's making an argument for identity.
High prison populations for
community identity.
Young males.
He's just trying to blur them together. Mr. Mishmash time. This is carrots and turnip mashed together.
Of educational opportunity or work opportunity. The data is available for that. So while community may be...
Remember science for psychology, because that's his God in little man's mind over here. He's thinking to himself, all I've got to do is remember. All I've got to do, right, all I've got to do is remember. His God is psychology. I've got it. His God is psychology, therefore science.
An incorrect term, literally. Yeah. There is a strata that seem to be underserved. And another concern I would have about some of...
And another concern I would have about this is whether or not you want to buy one of these lovely watches that fell off the back of a truck. Back of a lorry over on the street over there. Fell off the back of the lorry.
The repurposing,
of these here watches which fell off the back of the lorry.
As far as we know so far.
Say no more.
Of much of your oratory and online work seems to me that it supports the powerful. It supports hegemony. I don't agree that things are as simple as...
Everybody's Twitter feed has a bank advertised on it, don't they? Fucking Russell.
White men.
Jeez. Russell.
Or in a position of power, like.
No, Russell. Actually, he's making a very strong argument. I got to defend Peterson here. I don't like having to do this. but I'm going to do it here. Peterson is making an argument against hegemony. If you think you're going to making an argument that he's a patriarchal sort, you might be getting somewhere, but you're also a patriarchal sort if you like the friggin' Bible, but you're going to focus on Jesus and nobody else. Jesus' authority derives from where, Russell? Where does Jesus' authority derive from? Well, I think he was actually a person, not so much the son of God.
But
He's probably didn't exist at all, for all we know.
I'm only interested in who is able to affect change, who is able to influence.
It's people, fucker. Oh, Jesus, it's people. People's political power are being usurped by their identities and their communities and their groups, which know full well if they don't have this political power, they don't exist anymore. Some groups are so old and so stuck in their ways, and they insist on these ways, some pretty vile ways, and that's the problem. He's part of a group. This guy here is part of a you could call it a counterculture, which emerged in the 20th century. That's his cult. His particular cult starts more or less in the 20th century, but did it start out of nowhere? And is there a reason why we haven't talked about it yet?
Who can you not attack in public? What is possible? Like, who is
he's defending his cult now.
being controlled? That's what interests me.
Okay.
So, like, transnational corporations, economic elites.
People who control the media, who pay me.
Like, sort of, and how are they served by what I say or by what you say?
Okay, so that's a reference back to the existence of inequality. We agreed earlier
Yes,
that
inequality, back
is a
to
big
that.
problem.
He's a fine one to talk about inequality, is Mr. Russell Brand.
Oh yeah, it's
But you're saying
a
it's
massive
natural,
problem.
which clearly...
Well, it's not. You cannot lay it.
Because, he could just blow all the money on fucking blowing hookers. I mean, fucking blow heroin and hookers, in whatever order.
At the feet of capitalism. That's absolutely clear. That and the fact that it's natural.
It ain't
doesn't
bloody
make
helping, though,
doesn't
capitalism.
Make it desirable.
It ain't helping. It ain't helping. I've been on the left about many things for a long time, but you know what I don't agree with? That capitalism hasn't helped. I cannot agree with that. It's been exploitative, but has it not been helpful when the human population following the Second World War, this baby boom didn't come from capitalism. Not only that, but it came from socialized capitalism. Goodness gracious.
What's that?
Capitalism doesn't help. There's so many...
Oh.
Marxist critique, what I understand about it, is that capitalism is built on limitless growth from finite resources, and also capitalism will always be redirected and criminally misused. And
If that's the best argument you're going to use against capitalism and not talk about, I'm not going to say that unlimited growth is possible. I'm not going to argue that at all. What I will argue is capitalism's least enduring feature at the moment is the way that it relies upon ancient bookkeeping techniques to ensure that only a small number of individuals or entities accrue most of the value in whatever system we're talking about. Long before we put a word like capitalism on it, was Peterson's point. Mr. High and Mighty got himself right with everything. Cosmic order, I know everything, free. You don't want to think about that.
And the sort of the economics of our time, it sort of, for me, is demonstrable. I know sort of there are people that say, oh no, people are richer now than ever. But staying in LA for a while and there's 90,000 homeless people in the greater LA area, it seems like some sort of like the apocalypse is creeping in.
People are richer than they ever have been, but the extremes of inequality are high too. And there's some evidence. Well, here's an example of how these things might work. So imagine that people are getting richer. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But here's
like we got more stuff, even though, like, I'm sure you would agree that
starving. That's one.
Not starving. That's good.
Like obesity is a bigger problem in the world now than
starvation.
Right. That's a big deal. That's a big plus. But
in a way, it implies that people are being underserved by their operating systems.
But there's no doubt about it.
By their operating systems? Well, that's a fine way of saying he doesn't like nature, isn't it?
That.
And it's,
hey, we're being too easily tricked by our education, by our advertising, Yeah, and he's not helping that? Okay.
Still infers inequality also.
Oh yes. Well, first of all, there's no doubt that any social system has a tyrannical and arbitrary aspect. I mean, that's an archetypal trait. Any, of course.
Any.
Even well-functioning systems have a tyrannical aspect. Not mostly, or at least merely, because they require conformity.
It's why authority was once called archon in Greece, in ancient Greek, and we get the word anarchy from there. The anarchist's true ideal is that we would be free of the archons, which are who enforces the rules. So anarchy means no rulers, not so much no rules. You can have rules. We'll all be our own ruler. We will take the rules into account in our own behavior and be responsible to each other for failing to follow the rule. As opposed to having some tyrannical fucking archon marching around with a riot shield and a baton and a pepper spray and a taser and non-lethal rounds and a tank.
Americans who you're down with, not Native Americans, Native Canadians. Yeah. They're quack, 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 quack.
Yeah.
Native Canadians. We go part of it. What's the name? What is it they call? They're not only known as nations in Canada.
But them guys, like, how's their social system set up?
Oh, it's a catastrophe.
Go on.
Oh, well, I mean, it's a catastrophe for all sorts of reasons. I mean,
it's
some
catastrophe.
of it. Yeah, it is. It is. It's the situation is very catastrophic.
What
it's partly because, well, the reserve system was set up in Canada, and it had a possibility of working when there was a possibility that small communities could work economically. But small communities don't work economically anymore. Like if you go through Saskatchewan, for example, a central province in Canada, in the 1960s, there were thousands and thousands of small towns.
It was actually a catastrophe. All of the young people of two generations were taken away from their native communities, from their own families, and put into orphanages to try to westernize them, which resulted in a big catastrophe.
Mostly Caucasian.
That is because
they're done.
That's capitalism, no? Huh?
No, it's not.
Oh,
it's deeper than that. It's the same problem. Well,
it might be deeper than it, but in its current form, it is capitalism. Because I would agree.
Imperialism is capitalism is the same fucking thing.
Agree that what is.
I hate fucking Queen too.
Capitalism a manifestation of.
I don't much like the Queen, but is he going to say it? Some people might say that you don't like the Queen. That makes you all right.
Greed.
Well,
you could say.
It's the same thing but the same.
Greed is the same as capitalism. Well, that's a Milton Friedman way of looking at it. Milton Friedman was also wrong. So
the thing has happened all over the world. Like urbanization is taking place at a tremendously rapid rate. It doesn't matter what the culture is or the form of government.
So you think that the politics is happening at a lower level? The phenomenology that's that's significant is.
Oh, wait a minute. The phenomenology. Hang on. The lower level is the phenomenology. Where the hell are you going here? Where are you going here? Phenomenology can include anything. It could be your feelings on something. It's not only the external phenomena which you've been interpreting. It could also be internalized phenomena or things which occur to you during a dream, for Christ's sake. This doesn't have to be any real phenomena.
Is a bigger tide, and within it political systems are just blowing about. But that doesn't mean we should dismantle the ones we have in search of fairer, more just, better ones, particularly if they're empirically not working.
If we could come up with a way to reliably
Oh, it's empirically working. It is empirically working. The imbalance doesn't cause it to cease. The imbalance, which is what they call profit. That's the point. How could the profit be more equally shared or more fairly distributed is the way that the classical left were going around addressing this supposed problem. And there are ways around it. We still don't talk about them. Peterson won't, neither will Brand. Social credit be an example.
Latin inequality.
Happens to come from someone or from a group which is religious, Christian, social credit, therefore on the right.
that would be a good thing. But the empirical
Because
evidence
righteous.
suggests, so there's a bunch of things.
Because fair and righteous was their argument for it. Social credit is what it's called. Brand won't mention it. Neither will Peterson.
It suggests, first of all, if you look at the attempts to alleviate inequality over the last 200 years, whether there were left-wing governments in power or right-wing governments
Social
in power,
credit,
made
come on, Peterson.
absolutely no difference whatsoever to the degree of inequality. The only things that have been reliably demonstrated to flatten out inequality are catastrophes: wars, revolutions, epidemics. There's one other: war, revolution, epidemics. Well,
It's going to be
it
some
was-
kind of
oh,
horseman.
Now, yeah, that's right. It's another horseman. I can't remember which it is, but
Mental palaces. How do you keep these four straight? Oh, they're the four horsemen. Now you can remember them forever. Oh,
but the price of radical redistribution seems to
It's
be tremendous
catastrophe.
death. Yeah, and no one has come up with.
Do you
a
think that's
stable
because of
political
how power
solution.
functions? Because, like, you know, in an unequal system, whilst there are many people that are suffering, there are some people that are benefiting. I'm in a tier that benefits
Yes.
from the current.
here we go. We're going to get some admissions here. When he talks about Peterson and what they have in common, perhaps he should only speak for himself. Maybe that would be better. Maybe they don't actually share a lot in common at all when it really gets down to it.
Economic situation. I drive nice car. I
Yeah.
have nice house.
I drink like a fish.
Go
I
where I
mean,
want.
I
Well,
don't
let's look
anymore.
at that for a minute. Like, if you think about how that happened in your life, I bet I can tell you how it happened.
Go on.
Well, I mean, this isn't a
You used to be a shock jock, essentially, on BBC. You're a bastard, though.
personal account, but
Well,
you,
it better be.
you had success.
Otherwise, I'm not
you had
interested.
success in one dimension, right? High success. But because you were successful in that dimension, all sorts of opportunities came your way. Like, my suspicions are that where you're sitting now, you have more opportunities than you can deal with. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right.
There are
Well,
opportunities.
Right, exactly. Well, see, this is part of what seems to drive inequality, is that as you get successful,
Yeah, you think of this another way. Because he has all these opportunities he has to pick from, he doesn't get to do them all. And because they all chose him as the guy, now they've all been selected out of the will ever happen whatsoever because he didn't pick them.
the opportunities that come your way start to multiply, and they don't multiply linearly, they multiply exponentially. And so when you start moving up, you start moving up faster and faster and faster and faster. And then you'll hit a point where you have so many opportunities that you don't even know what to do with them. And so it's a nonlinear improvement. But the downside of that is, and you might have had periods in your life that were like this too, where let's say you start to get depressed, and then you start to drink because you're depressed. And then
You start to do what? Oh, you start to drink. Oh, but alcohol is a depressant.
start to isolate yourself because you're
And
drunk
so it
and you're
goes-
depressed, and because you're drunk and depressed, then your friends start to abandon
get even more
and then you
depressed.
lose your job. It's
Oh.
like you're not going downhill in a straight line. You're going downhill faster and faster and faster till you fall off a cliff.
Again,
and that
exponential.
seems to be how the world works. It's like there's a center point. It's unstable. Things improve, then they improve exponentially, and things fall, and then they fall off exponentially. And that seems to be what's driving it.
Hey, gravity is an exponential thing. It's not merely linear. It's actually exponential. It's quadratic, if we use the term for it. It's got a square in it. It's an acceleration. So it gets faster and faster as you fall. Anything which falls, like if you're in a cliff, unless the cliff is really friggin' high or you jump out of an airplane, you don't hit terminal velocity for some way down.
Inequality. You start to succeed, and the probability that you'll continue to succeed starts to expand. And we don't know how to control that. And well, here's some other examples of it though, because I said you could
If it isn't exponential, you can't fly.
lay it at the feet of capitalism. The same thing happens to cities. A small proportion of the cities get all the people. So some cities grow like mad, and others fail catastrophically, like Detroit. It applies to the mass of stars. So there's a very few stars in the Milky Way that have most of the matter. So it
We're in a dwarf star here. Interesting point to make.
applies to the height of trees in the jungle.
Right. And you think if things are applicable
Yep.
in cosmology and in biology, the way that they are, their application politically and sociologically becomes less relevant because you see these phenomena as being broader
Well,
than
I don't think
meliorism.
I don't
Is
think
that the
it's
right word?
I don't think
Human
it's,
interaction.
Who's trying to link this all together? Like it's all fucking interlinked, man. It's all fucking interlinked. 33, man, 33.
I don't think it's less relevant. I just see.
I'm using my brain. My name is Kreskin. I've come from the future to save you from yourself.
I don't think the left-wingers are pessimistic enough about the problem. They say,
oh, I passed pessimism in 1994 and learned to call myself a cynic. Fellow from Alberta helped me do that.
the inequality is a problem. It's inequality is a problem. Like it's a terrible problem. But then they say, well, it's probably a function of our political
I ain't even kidding. The guy from Alberta.
and economic systems, and we could fix those. It's like, no, it's not a function of our political and economic systems. Or if it is, it's at such a deep level that we don't know what drives it, and we certainly don't know how to control it. Like,
So, but does that not mean, Jordan, that would you then reject any attempt to alter systems in favour of fairness? Because it seems to me that the focus is on, like, and as it would be for a clinical psychologist.
I'm going to back this up right now.
like
He's going to ask another question. I'm going to stop and resume. It'll be a third part, and it'll go right to the end for the last half hour.